Character design often acts as your first introduction to a character and what makes them tick. Whether it's a symbol they're associated with or a particular choice in clothing, without a word of dialogue you can make inferences about what a character likes or dislikes, what drives them, and how they think. This is certainly true of live action works or the descriptions of characters provided in books, but for the sake of this discussion I think it's most interesting to look at the works where everything about a character, from their eyebrows to their hair colour, has been carefully and deliberately constructed. As good as the costume design in, say, Breaking Bad is, I'm going to focus on works where the entirety of the character was designed, rather than those where only their costumes or makeup were. So this will be an exploration of some of my favourite examples of character design in drawn or animated works. Before we get to part 1, I'd like to tip my proverbial hat to a few examples of character design I love that didn't quite make it into the video outside of these brief acknowledgements. First, and to no surprises for long-time viewers, I'd like to mention Avatar: The Last Airbender. Taking inspiration from real-life cultures and religions for each of the 4 bending nations provided a basis for the whole show's narrative. It lent an immediate sense of depth to what otherwise might have appeared a typical kids' show on the surface. Mirror's Edge offers another favourite example in Faith. While I think most of the character design in Mirror's Edge was okay, Faith's was fantastic. Her tattoos, clean black, white and red outfit, and her distinctive footwear all lent themselves to a character that suited the stylized world of her game, but also felt grounded where some characters felt ridiculous. While later games would try to replicate the design of Faith, see Portal's Shell, no other game or character within even came close. With games mentioned, I'd like to touch on Deus Ex: Human Revolution. Where Mirror's Edge featured an incredible bit of character design for the protagonist, but middling examples elsewhere, I think Human Revolution offers the opposite. Where the protagonist in Adam Jensen feels a little ridiculous between his voice, his hair and his sunglasses, a lot of the other characters were wonderfully designed. In particular, I love Sarif and Malik. Sarif for the wealth and ambition that seemed a little at odds with his surroundings, both in his office and in Detroit in general, and Malik for how naturally what is actually some quite involved design comes across. The real star of Human Revolution's design is the world, so packed with details the characters in it almost play second fiddle, but there's some great character design going on all the same. Finally, I'd like to end with an example that I really wanted to talk about, but just couldn't make it work in the main body of this script. That example being Retsuko from Aggretsuko. Sanrio has a pedigree when it comes to character design. Hello Kitty has for decades been an icon of both children's entertainment and alternative fashion, and while I doubt Aggretsuko will have quite the same sticking power, it features a central character with a delightful design. While working or socializing, she's the embodiment of the perfect upstanding Japanese citizen, and when she's angry or singing karaoke, she's... well, look for yourself. In her 2 character designs you have an acceptance of her position, a desire to fit in and comfortably live within the boundaries her work and relationships would put her in, while in the other is a total rejection of the meek, accepting nature she seems to otherwise embody. As much of a delight as Aggretsuko is, I'm going to leave discussion of it for another video. For this video, I'm going to start with a JoJo reference. JoJo arguably offers the most recognisable style of character design in any currently running show. Every character offers a ridiculous combination of clothes, physiques and poses that add up to a wholly unique style. What I find particularly interesting about JoJo is both how rigid these designs are in each season and how dramatically those designs change between seasons. Where else could I begin but with Jotaro's hat? Jotaro's hat is a source of endless fascination. The precise point where it transitions into his hair is a point of contention among fans, and it offers us an interesting entry point to a discussion of JoJo's character design. Much like the blurred line between his hat and hair, the line between his character and its design is similarly blurred. His stoic, unflappable attitude is somehow intrinsically tied to the modified school uniform he wears. In the brief glimpses we see of him without some part of it, he feels like an entirely different character. Precisely what the specific modifications and fashion choices he's made say about him is hard to pinpoint, although he does seem to have had some kind of traumatic experience involving a belt failing. But JoJo doesn't seem complete without those fashion choices. Jotaro is his clothing. His hair is his hat, and the line between the two is largely irrelevant. His character and his design are irrevocably linked. This is true for the majority of JoJo's cast too. Will Zappelli's hat may as well be Zappelli himself, and Caesar Zappelli's hat may as well be Caesar himself. This may sound like a description of a particularly rigid approach to character design, but between each season, character designs can change dramatically. Here we return to Jotaro's hat. Like Jonathan before him, JoJo's design changes dramatically with his age. As a student, his modified uniform was very much a part of him, but as an adult, his clothes naturally change. Black becomes white, his khaki t-shirt becomes a blue jumper, and even the style with which he's drawn changes to match a style best suited to telling the story of Josuke. Character design is typically rigid within each arc, but changes, sometimes dramatically, to suit each new arc. Although the character design in JoJo certainly evolves, it tends to do so in large steps. From Jotaro's school uniform to his ridiculous white outfit, there's a big gap. While there's nothing wrong with such an approach, there are interesting results that can be had from a more granular approach to character design. My favourite example of such an approach can be found in Watchmen. Watchmen is full of brilliant character design, and while the first mask we are introduced to is perhaps the most famous, it's the second that most effectively embodies the granular approach to character design I find so noteworthy. The comedian is the most repulsive of the characters in Watchmen. He's implied to have murdered children and raped women, and he gloried in the state-sanctioned slaughter in Vietnam. He's not someone to be admired. He's a hard man, and just what sort of man he was is communicated through his face and his costume. You can trace his history through his appearance, his massive scars to the woman who gave them to him, and the changes in his costume to his mental state at the time. A bright yellow outfit when he's young and cocky, later a mockery of the American patriotism that employed him to slaughter thousands in Vietnam, and finally the addition of a leather mask to protect the newfound vulnerability he, and America as a whole, felt after Vietnam, even in an alternate history in which America won. A similar internal change can be mapped to the character of Rorschach, not in a change of costume, but in a change of its condition. Before a certain point his costume is clean and maintained, but after it's forever stained, tattered and torn. Dr. Manhattan, meanwhile, demonstrates a slowly increasing total detachment. As he sheds his costume, his grasp on humanity is slipping ever further. To leave a discussion of character design in Watchmen having merely looked at how it changes over time to reflect a character's mental state seems a terrible waste. So, before moving on, I'd like to talk about two of my favourite efforts in character design, and the insult of what the Zack Snyder film did to them. I'm of course talking about the design of Night Owl 2 and Ozymandias. As I mentioned earlier, this video won't focus on live action works, so I'll summarise what I thought of Snyder's Watchmen as such. It wasn't great in general, it missed a lot of the point of the original, it meddled with the ending and other key moments, and they tried to make the Minutemen, and Rorschach in particular, more likeable. As a standalone film, it was average, but as an adaptation of Watchmen, it was an insult. Basically, I hate it. There is one aspect of the film that often receives praise though, that being how visually similar the film is to the graphic novel, thanks in no small part to the decision to use the original panels as the storyboard. The result was shots like this that closely mirrored the original artwork. Cool, the film didn't land for me, but at least it put effort into, say, Rorschach's costume, which was pretty well done. Two costumes, however, my personal favourites from the graphic novel, mind you, weren't merely done poorly, they were completely ignored. Snyder thought the obviously clever idea of ever-changing blots for Rorschach's mask was worth doing, but not the subtler but no less brilliant ideas that went into Night Owl 2 and Ozymandias' costumes. He turned the regal purple and gold of Ozymandias' costume into a bat nipples joke, while Night Owl 2 was just a discount batsuit so boring I forget what it looks like the moment I look away. In the graphic novel, Night Owl 2's costume was a wonderful reflection of the person within it. I love how it evokes his love of birds, his nerdier tendencies, and adore the sheer beauty of these peach ridges on his mask, the yellow goggles against the brown body, and the rounded owl-like form that tells of a rich man who can afford to indulge in the fantasy beyond what was entirely practical. This is incredible costume design that in the graphic novel worked in tandem with a subtly brilliant character design, and what Snyder and co did to it was a crime. So too was what happened to Ozymandias' costume, where all of the arrogance and wealth that defines both the costume and the man who made it is ignored because Snyder wanted to make a cheap callback to George Clooney's Batman. These two costumes represent some of my absolute favourite examples of character design, and where Snyder clearly didn't appreciate them as much as I do, I just want to say, god damn, I love these character designs. While my previous examples, all in one way or another, reflected the internal lives of the characters, here I'd like to look at Kill la Kill, purely for how much fun they had with each design. If we're talking about each character design individually, I think Watchmen comes out on top of everything else. Every single character design was damn near perfect, and while some of Kill la Kill's comes close, Watchmen just comes out on top of each and every comparison. Kill la Kill though has so many characters, so many of whom go through significant costume changes, that Kill la Kill evens out the playing field on sheer force of numbers. There is one specific factor that left me inclined to talk about it last though. Though I have a special reverence for the designs of Watchmen that Kill la Kill can't quite match, that work felt like work. It feels laboured, deliberate and precise. Not so with Kill la Kill. That's not to imply there wasn't as much work involved in Kill la Kill's character design, but however much work it was, it felt effortless to me as the viewer. In character after character after character, Kill la Kill packed in so much energy into each design. Whether it was Satsuki's domineering eyebrows, Ryuko's powerful gaze, or Mako's bizarre mouth, every character has a tremendous energy about them, as though everyone involved in designing, animating, and voicing each character was just grinning stupidly the whole time. With a gun to my head, I'll say Watchmen has the better character design. But if the question is which I'm most excited to talk about, well, that's gonna be Kill la Kill. In previous sections, I've focused on the clothes or appearance of each character, but here I'd like to start with the movement of each character. Satsuki's heels, their fast about turns and hard clacks are almost as recognisable as Satsuki herself. It's an announcement of her entry into a scene and a point of emphasis for her character almost constantly in the first half of the series. Mako's movement, meanwhile, is particularly abstract and often played for laughs. Later, Nui shares a similarly abstract style of movement, but now as a means to inspire anger or frustration. Ryuko is reckless and uncontrolled, while Satsuki is patient and restrained. Non walks with a little bounce and sense of pride, and Gamaguri stomps and crouches through environments clearly too small for his bulk. Before even looking at their clothes or hair, movement alone tells you most of the story of each character. Then we've got the colours associated with each character. They aren't subtle, but the regal blues, yellows and whites wonderfully complement Satsuki's domineering and restrained public facade, while Ryuko's black, red and yellow nicely match her headstrong, confident and reckless nature. Then there's the various colours of the Goku uniforms and Kamui worn by the main characters, all contributing to the sense that each character is unique in motivation, personality and experience. On top of all that, we finally have the fun that was had transforming each character from moment to moment. The huge difference between Mikasugi's teacher disguise and his nudist attire is an obvious example. The way Mako changes shape and colour to match whatever visual pun is going on at the time would be another, but perhaps the best example, and my favourite, can be found in Ryuko herself. First introduced in a modified sailor uniform with a guitar case slung across her back, she goes through multiple distinct character designs, and each is just so much fun. From her pajamas to Senketsu when he's first introduced, all the way to the Senketsu scarf outfit and the wedding dress, Kill la Kill delights in changing up and playing with a character's visual style. And somehow, despite those constant changes, they still feel consistent. This is character design done so well and so frequently that the effect is that of a real character drawn in different outfits or styles, when in reality it's one character brought to life by all of those individual styles. And if that's not exciting character design, I don't know what is. So that's it. 3 of my favourite examples of character design and a very brief explanation of why I find it so exciting. While I just want an excuse to talk about these 3 examples in this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What are some great examples of character design that I've missed? As always, let me know in the comments below. Cheers! Have a good one.